this is going to be your only warning towards this review. This movie is fucking dark. This includes sexual assault, violence, and various other adult themes. If you don't like that kind of shit, then you can leave. Also, this review will be containing spoilers for some plot points in the movie, so if you want to go in blind, then, again, you can leave. You gone? Alright, cool. On with the review. Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Manga Writer and today I'm going to be looking at a movie that is from a company that is a little more controversial. I'm sure some of my audience know what the Daily Wire is, but to the people who aren't terminally online and have allowed political bullshit to destroy their mental health, the Daily Wire is a newish company that acts as a conservative news outlet. Think of it like Fox News, run by many different hosts such as Ben Shapiro, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, and Andrew Klavan, who all talk about current news, mainly American news, and supply the world with a more conservative, patriotic, and religious perspective. This company is one of the biggest critics towards the modern lifestyle, and the hosts of each show make it their mission to call out and criticize where the world is going wrong, from the government's high above, the growing tolerance of what is considered taboo, to the degradation of American culture, and the arts. The arts is definitely one of the biggest things these hosts criticize, Andrew Klavan specifically, with every new Hollywood and TV show nowadays being filled with various political motives that they deem to be dangerous, creepy, and uncomfortable. And for the longest time, the Daily Wire was basically just a critic. This made the online public see them as being lesser than their Hollywood rivals, and considering that the Daily Wire never made their own content, this painted the company as being just another source of cultural and political criticism without much baggage. That was, until they started making their own media. After so many years of critiquing Hollywood's political narratives, hundreds of millions of dollars in donations that made the company bigger, along with the hiring of many actors and writers Hollywood considered to be problematic, the Daily Wire has finally bit the bullet and is making their own content. Terror on the Prairie, written by Josiah Nelson and directed by Michael Polish, is the first film to be made under the Daily Wire banner, and was marketed as being the countercultural movie to fight against Hollywood. This was done by one of the trailers making the same mistake as woke media, by preaching more to the choir as opposed to telling the audience what the movie was actually about, and most of the hosts on the Daily Wire promoting the shit out of the film, praising not only its high production quality, but its representation of conservative, pro-American values. And because I am one to stick to my principles, rather than dismissing this movie as being just another propaganda piece and label it as conservative X, Y, and Z, I put my political leanings to the wayside and gave the film an honest chance. If I could do this with High Guardian Spice, then I think it's fair that I should do it here as well. At the end of the day, a lot of my views on media can just be boiled down to, if it's good, I like it, I don't really care. And after giving the film a watch and digesting everything I saw, well, here are my thoughts of Terror on the Prairie, starting with its general plot. The story takes place in Montana State, a few years after the American Civil War between the North and the South, where Hattie and Jeb McAllister, played by Gina Carano and Donald Cerrone, are trying to live the harsh and brutal life in the lands of Montana to a degrading amount of success. After Jeb goes to the town to get a job thanks to the persistence of Hattie, Hattie gets a visit from a group of outlaws, led by a man named Miller, played by Nick Searcy, and after figuring out the men killed many people, Hattie holds them at gunpoint and demands that they leave. And for the majority of the movie, she, along with her son, fight off the outlaws, who refuse to leave for unknown reasons. And so, it's a race against time as Hattie tries her best to fight off and escape the outlaws, while waiting for her husband to get back to save her, while the outlaws' motives start to become clearer and clearer by the minute. Let's first go over the things I liked about the movie. For one, this film is fucking gorgeous. There are so many shots in this movie that do a very good job in showing the emptiness and the brutality of an open American savanna. It makes sure to hammer home just how small the characters are by having lots of wide and drawn out shots that focus more on the size of the background and the setting rather than the characters themselves. The first 35 minutes of the film is where the use of these shots are at their best. They're really pretty to look at. The camera work is also mostly really impressive, with the movie doing many different long shots with very minimal cuts, which are usually only reserved for small conversations and action scenes. And some of these long shots are very fun to watch, some last for a good couple of minutes. As for makeup, costume design, and colors, they are also handled superbly well. Because of its fantastic makeup and washed out colors, the film looks beautifully grungy, dirty, and very unkempt, with characters' faces, clothes, and hair looking wild and worn out. Even the hooker from the town's tavern has that weathered look to her. Be gone, fuck! No character looks truly clean in this movie, and the film's ability to capture the feeling of the Old West's harshness and brutality was very impressive to see. They even had some Native Americans in the movie, which not only spoke in the old language, but were seen as just people walking by needing help, with them going as far as to give Mattie a knife after she helped them with a woman's injuries. Maybe this was offensive and it just went over my head, but honestly, I didn't see anything particularly offensive about how they were written. They didn't come off as savages, I'll say that much. As for the effects, that gets the highest praise from me, especially when the film handles violence. This film's bloody and gory scenes were the highlight of the movie for me. The way the film manages to show just enough to create a brutal image in your head while also having some very drawn out scenes where you get to see some of the gore up close made me squirm in my seat for just how realistically brutal it was. Everything from the color of the blood to the way the sound effects were used to give the gore an extra bit of crunch. In Terror on the Prairie, the violence isn't seen as actiony or badass, but disgusting, unnerving, and scarily brutal. When characters get shot or get injured, you can see, hear, and feel just how painful it is. These scenes showcase some of the best acting in the movie. The moments where Miller pitch scalps a man, Hattie sewing an open injury on a Native American woman, and Miller slicing the throat of one of Hattie's neighbors were all very good examples of the film's excellent use of gore. The makeup artists they got for this movie knew damn well what they were doing. It looked so fucking convincing. When it comes to the characters, I'd say that overall, they were decently written. Miller was easily the best character in the movie, in the way that he serves as a representation of a man who is slowly being corrupted, while claiming he's still a man of God. And the way Nick carries himself in the movie was really good. He definitely had that sense of being both an understandable villain while also still being terrifying. The opening of the movie did a really good job of building him up. In one interview made by the Daily Wire, Andrew did make this comment that a lot of conservatives didn't like the fact that the villain was religious.
I mean, one of the things that struck me, some of our audience obviously complained about the fact that you quote, the evil guy quotes the Bible a lot.
But honestly, I just don't really see the problem. A good villain's a good villain. And Nick's character is definitely one of those. His minions also had some really good performances, with many of them giving off that classic Laughing Goonies vibes that old movies had a lot of back in the day. The husband, while barely being in the movie, had some good moments here and there. Be gone, fuck! And his whole thing surrounding his ability to use a gun effectively was used fairly decently here. Though I will say I don't think he has the voice, if I'm being honest. There is one line where Gina says his voice sounded like a commander, and when you hear it,
"This is our dream, Hattie. This we set out to do. Build a home on land we can call our own."
We can't make it on our own.
Hell yes we can. We just gotta keep on going. Vengeance belongs to the Lord, Miller.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. But let's talk about the character that I think stood out the most for me. Gina's character, Mattie. Let's just say I did not expect to feel the way about her when I went into this. When it comes to Mattie's character, I found her to be very interesting in the fact that the movie made her a strong female character, but in a different sense. Rather than being a gaslight gatekeep girl boss, God I hate that fucking phrase, that doesn't need a man to save her while shooting guns with the accuracy of a well-trained sniper, Hattie is shown to be a housewife that does a lot of work around the house, cooking and taking care of her baby while her son and her husband are away. And when she's in action, she's shown to be a bad shot, is easily overpowered by the men when they get their hands on her, and even gets her son to help her out when fighting the outlaws because he has a better shot than her. On the surface, this does seem to make Hattie out to be a damsel in distress that can't fend for herself, but in a surprising twist, I never got that feeling from her. Because even though she can't defeat a man in hand-to-hand combat or shoot someone from any distance further than a few feet, Hattie is still a very strong and tough character in her own sense. One of the ways the movie shows this is making her very intelligent and resourceful. There are many scenes contained in the film where Hattie will use her clothing, her house, and her speech to get herself out of a bad situation, and this is where her truth strength lies. One of these examples was the scene where she found out that the outlaws were killers. So when she went back into the house, she manages to meticulously hide some shotgun shells in her clothes, move around the outlaws to get to her son's shotgun, take the gun while the boys were saying a prayer, load the gun, and point it at her enemies, all without being noticed. And despite being outnumbered 4-1, Hattie was able to not only get the outlaws to leave, but also get them to surrender their guns, which she uses to fight them off. Another scene where Hattie uses her intelligence to outsmart one of the outlaws was when she talks to one that claims that he wants to help her out. But after he slips up, Hattie mysteriously shoots the man dead, and when asked about it by her son, who thought he genuinely wanted to help them, she reveals the fact that she never gave out the name of her husband to the outlaws. While she may not be the best shot and can't overpower her enemies using strength, Hattie's resourcefulness and intelligence more than makes up for her lack of power. She knows that she can't fight the outlaws head on and thus uses her brains rather than her brawn. Which I will admit was sometimes hard to believe because Gina Carano is famous for being an exceptionally good fighter, but that is just me, nothing against the film. She is able to still be strong in the sense that she acts more like a protective mother rather than a fighter. Instead of having more masculine tendencies, the movie makes her femininity her biggest strength. Everything she does in the movie is done with the mindset that she needs to protect her family and especially her children. She always goes in with the notion that even if she might be in mortal danger, at least the children will be safe. She knows that she can't physically overpower her foes, so she uses her resources and her knowledge of her own house to get the upper hand. There's even a scene where she puts the knife she got from the Native Americans in a drawer, and by the end of the movie she uses that knife to kill someone. It's that kind of build-up that I personally really like. Gina's character, to put it very simply, is a conservative's take on a strong female character, and if I'm being honest, I found it to be quite refreshing. Because despite her being a lot weaker than in her other action roles, it definitely feels like the writer wrote the character in a way to show that women can still be very strong, but just not in the typical sense. Rather than feeling like Hattie was written to be an insult or a jab towards modern female characters made in Hollywood, Terror on the Prairie feels more like it's praising the power of motherly love and traditional femininity, while at the same time refusing to fetishize it and just show it as what it is. Which was really good because the film very easily could have gone down that route, but it didn't. She kind of reminds me a lot of Mrs. Brisby from The Secret of Nim, who wasn't very physically strong either, but was still a very powerful character. It was honestly really good to see a more diverse way to look at this trope, so good job on the writer's part. Basically what I'm trying to get at here is if you go into this movie and then come out of it thinking that Gina Carano's character is weak, you didn't fucking pay attention. So, with my praises of the movie all laid out and polished, let's talk about my criticisms and general observations of the movie. My first criticism was that the film had some trouble when it came to handling stakes. There were many moments in this film that felt like the characters either should have gotten caught or should have been killed a lot quicker. And some of the chase scenes, like the one in the opening and the one at the river, felt almost comical in how long it took the outlaws to catch their victims. I feel like the movie's lack of cutting didn't do them any favors when it came to filming these moments. A few cuts would have been fine. One of the things I noticed very early on in the film was the movie's lack of music. And after seeing it all, I can tell you that music is pretty much non-existent. Out of the almost 2-hour film, there were only 2 examples of music being played, with one being more background noise than anything else. I do understand that the movie wanted the countryside and the world to be the music instead of having musical tracks, and they also wanted to capture that feeling of old Western movies, which according to a friend, was very common back then. And to an extent, I get it, that choice was a fairly effective one, but where I think this decision shot the movie in the foot was when it came to the more intense scenes. The lack of music playing during an intense conversation and the shootout scenes made some of the fights feel a little too empty. While I'm not asking for a massive film score to be playing, I do think that having some music here and there would have made some of these intense moments a lot more impactful and wouldn't have hurt the movie at all. At the end of the day, this is a movie. You don't have to be completely realistic. You're allowed to have music. Hell, the ending song is why I felt the ending was so powerful. Music just added that extra bit of life to it. Another thing I noticed about the movie was just how...
But Pa's a hero. He defended Missouri from the Rebs.
Your pa was a Reb.
Our young host was born after hostilities ended. I'm sure he's a proud American, aren't you, boy? Nothing wrong with that. Man should be loyal to his own country. Not everybody is. I'm a Cameron man myself. That big fellow over there, he's from Arkansas, but we try not to hold that against him.
American, it is. This film is unashamedly American. Like what I said in the movie's plot synopsis, this movie takes place a couple of years after the American Civil War, and characters will constantly mention the war as a way to show motives and goals for characters on both sides. The whole reason Miller was terrorizing Mattie was because, spoilers, he wanted revenge on Jeb for killing his daughter during the war when he joined the North side, abandoning the South. Now, I'm not saying this is really a criticism towards the film because it doesn't really get in the way of the film's overall story. I definitely was able to get most of what was going on. But in saying that, I definitely feel like this movie was made with an American-centered audience in mind, which makes some of the lines referencing the war not really that powerful to me because as an outsider, I never really learned much about the war, and thus don't understand everything besides slavery being a cause of it. You'll get more out of this film if you're just a dirty Yank, that's pretty much all I'm trying to say. And my last criticism is that some of the acting felt a little off. Not only was the kid actor, well, a kid actor and thus wasn't that great in the role, there were some points in the movie where I felt like the acting was a bit stilted. Like the actors weren't given much direction on how to say a line and thus made some of the dialogue feel a little...
Son of a bitch! She got him, Captain! Now I gotta tell his mama a damn fool kid couldn't lie for shit!
Ma! He was just trying to help.
Forced in places. A lot of these moments I would say came from Gina Carano, who will sometimes be muttering when a character is shouting at her from a distance away.
I'd like for us to start over. Make it right.
There's nothing to talk about, except you men getting on your horses and riding off.
I ain't never hurt a woman or a child.
Why should I believe a word you say?
And some of her shouts of panic not feeling very real in some scenes.
Mr. Samuelson, no! Go get help!
Woman to holler and carry on such.
He hasn't done anything to you!
I'll have to resort to other methods.
You don't have to do this.
But even a preacher's boy has got his limits.
Please. He has a wife and 5 children.
I'm not saying that Gina was bad, she carries the movie whenever she's acting calm and dangerous, but there were definitely some times where I feel like she wasn't given the best direction when acting out some of her lines. But all in all, after giving the film an honest chance and going into it with an open mind, I was pleasantly surprised. The movie, despite its questionable marketing strategies and some little flaws, was actually pretty good. With its lovely camera work, great effects, and fairly tight story, Terror on the Prairie was overall a good watch. And if you're a fan of westerns or just want to see how a conservative would make a movie in today's times, I recommend that you give it a shot. For a movie that didn't have Hollywood backing it up, this movie definitely stands on its own, fairly solidly. But what I'm sure your biggest question for me is this movie political? Does the movie's politics get in the way of the story? After watching the movie, I can tell you for certain that aside from hearing maybe 1 or 2 lines that are very blatantly pro-American, I can tell you that no, it does not. This movie does not try to shove any political message down your throat, it doesn't do anything like that. It just simply tells a story of people living in the Wild West, and that's basically it. You are not going to get any political lecture in this movie, which is another strength that it has. And this isn't the end of Daily Wire content. According to a video made by Ben Shapiro, the company has invested over $100 million into creating more kid-oriented content.
Well, we here at the Daily Wire, for months and months and months, we have been talking and putting into place a plan to do children's content. Well, we announced yesterday that over the next 3 years, we would be investing $100 million here at the Daily Wire into making children's entertainment content.
And if Terror on the Prairie is a look into what kind of quality their content can be, I'm willing to go into whatever they produce with a more open mind. Honestly, I wish them the best. I hope they make some good shit. My only suggestion is that, please, just don't do what you criticize and make your show spread a certain narrative. A lot of us just want to watch good shit. Please be aware of that. But for now, my name is Manga Writer, and yes, you fell for more clickbait. Not sorry!